I don't respect David Wood. His approach, I think, is very bad in many ways, and I need to talk about that.
Welcome to the Revo Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reason with faith.
Muslims are converting nominal Christians, for sure.
David Wood, he's known for, of course, converting Nabeel or being a big part of that.
When I was Muslim, looking into the things of Christianity, a large part of that had to do with my friend David here.
David, what are you doing? Those aren't Qurans, are they?
No.
You're not going to burn these books, are you?
Well, the thought had crossed my mind.
No! Don't burn these books. Books are filled with valuable information. Here, let me randomly pick one and open to a random page. Uthman sent to every Muslim province one copy of what they had copied, and ordered that all the other Quranic materials, whether written in fragmentary manuscripts or whole copies, be burnt.
Let me see that.
Nabeel or being a big part of that.
Sure.
And now having that close relationship with Apostate prophet.
I want to bring up something. I want to just throw in something that I find very funny and very beautiful. For the longest time, I always thought, no, if I want to practice something, if I want to follow something, I have to know 100% in my mind that it is absolutely true. It was actually David who recently helped me overcome that by just mentioning to me that that if you always think that you have to be 100% sure of what lies in front of you, you won't get anywhere. Of course, he said that all of this in a much more profound way, but it helped. So despite the fact that David Wood is a terrible influence on me, just kidding, I can learn a lot from him.
And then now seeing Apostate prophet kind of go over as well.
I thought it was coming to me normally because
yeah. So I recently went to church, and I have to collect all my thoughts about this now. Technically, I went to church for the first time a month ago, several weeks ago, for the first time with my wife. It might be possible to live as atheists for other people, but for me, to be very, very honest and very blunt, it wasn't a very pleasant ride. It wasn't a very pleasant experience. In fact, most of the time, over the last 2 years or so, I felt this dreadful feeling of emptiness and hopelessness and nothing to look forward to and nothing to live for. And whenever it came creeping up, I was just terrified by it. I have replaced it with prayer. Yes, despite the fact that I only just went to church for the first time to practice, I have been practicing prayers for a month or two.
And then now seeing Apostate prophet kind of go over as well. Some people would look at his kind of strategy and kind of bluntness and be like, okay, well, I guess it's working because it worked with Nabeel. It's working with Apostate prophet.
I don't respect David Wood. His approach, I think, is very bad in many ways, and I need to talk about that. Many Christians love the content. What I will say is what someone like him and many others online are producing is very entertaining. I only care about is actually reaching people. And now when I say only, I'm obviously with the caveat, using the truth, using sound argumentation, okay, and showing respect, okay? That is an essential part also of how we're supposed to do it as Christians, okay? So with gentleness and respect, which I don't see. So that's a huge issue. I don't agree because it's not biblical what they're doing. They're doing it with mockery, and they try to justify the mockery because they see some extreme example of a prophet. I'm like, you are not a prophet. There needs to be public apologies by minimum. And I would say even that's not enough because, to physically tear up the Quran, to eat pages, I don't know if you know all the things that he does.
I've never seen those ones.
These are things that he does a lot.
I saw the toilet paper one. What would you say then to someone, I think it was on Ruslan's podcast where he was interviewed David Wood, where he said, well, the reason why I do it in that manner is because it's effective. And it actually...
When I got out, then I meet Nabeel, and he's also pretty aggressive in the way he approaches things. So we became really good friends, but we were also just blasting away at each other. And we didn't see any problem with that. But over time, I learned that Nabeel responded a lot more if you're sort of just bluntly, forcefully coming at him rather than, trying to be nice or something like that. And at first I thought it was him because I didn't know a lot of other Muslims. I knew Muslims in prison, but that was prison Muslims. That's not like nice nice Muslims walking down the street and so on. So I was that way from interacting with Nabeel, and I learned from him that he actually respects a more aggressive approach. And it was, like I picked that up when we were watching a debate between Jamal Badawi and William Lane Craig, and that was one of the most one-sided debates I've ever seen. I mean, Craig absolutely crushed everything Badawi said. Badawi couldn't answer anything Craig said. And by the end, Badawi was like yelling and so on. And from a Western perspective, most people would look at that and say, you're yelling because you're desperate, you're losing, and you're getting flustered. And Craig is calm because he knows he's winning. He doesn't have to start yelling. We finished watching the debate. I would have scored it like 95-5 to be generous. And we finished that, and I said, so, Nabeel, what'd you think? And he said, Badawi clearly won. It was very interesting to me because there are people who just side with their guy, but Nabeel's not like that. Nabeel will honestly assess, a debate. And so I was like, what are you seeing? And it took me a while to unpack it. And what he was seeing was, when he actually broke it down to me, when Badawi starts yelling, it's because Badawi is passionate because there is a man who is leading people astray about God. And so he is so confident that he's right that it's welling up in a righteous anger. Craig is calm because deep down he doesn't believe what he's saying. And so I have to be aware. I'm thinking I need to be aware of what they're seeing because we're looking at the same thing and seeing things completely differently. So I had to be kind of aware of that. And, as time goes on, I found out other Muslims think the same way. Not all Muslims, but there a higher proportion of Muslims.
They like it when you challenge them. And I can tell you're very passionate about this, right? Because there's a way that you've been kind of evangelizing. And
the reason I'm passionate is I've actually met Muslims who have come back to Islam because of David Wood.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So...
And they've told you that themselves?
Yes.
Like, hey, we watched this guy, and because of him, I actually...
Yeah, like there's a famous interaction between him and Sheikh Uthman, where he and Anthony Rogers and there were other guys with them, and it was mainly those two that interacted with him. And there's like 2 or 3 videos that are about an hour to an hour and a half long. And if you watch those interactions where he goes to Sheikh Uthman's booth, and they make videos afterward reflecting on, I watch a lot of their content because I want to know what's actually influencing Christians about reaching Muslims. Even if I don't agree with it, I do consume a lot of the content. And so I'm not speaking as someone who doesn't know what they're saying and what they're doing, right? And
I watched most of their...
And I used to think that their argumentation was good years ago. Then I actually started engaging Muslims and found out that's not true. And especially, as I'm digging into the sources and I'm hearing what Muslims are saying, and then I'm looking at it and no, actually they're right in their So, and actually I remember there was I think he was being interviewed by Cameron Bertuzzi on Capturing Christianity. I think it was an interview like the last couple of years where he was asked the question like, how do you kind of anticipate when you're putting out a video, like what they're going to anticipate, what they're going to say in response, and how do you prepare for that? He says, I just put out the video. I don't think about what they're going to say. I'm like, what? Like, it's foolishness. He says, well, all I care is if they interact with it. Well, okay, so if you think about it, also psychologically even, if you even like for yourself as a Christian, look, when somebody comes to you and they bring objections to Christianity and you're able to fend off those objections, you walk away feeling
better.
Yeah, you feel more confident about your faith.
Yeah.
Well, guess what we're doing? We're helping them feel more confident about their faith in Islam. Because we use bad arguments, they rebut them all, they walk away, look, I won. And the Christian walks away very frustrated. And anybody who engages with Muslims, unless they're just like there to mock them and attack them, which I don't think is the average Christian who actually has a heart for Muslims, doesn't want to do that. They want to reach them. And they might laugh along at the content and they think it's interesting. They might think it's a good argument, but they haven't actually tried it with a Muslim and they haven't talked with Muslims. And they probably think, well, I can't really use that. And even David would have said you shouldn't. You shouldn't use his arguments. Because he said on many occasions on panels and live streams and things or in interviews, well, he said, people come up to me and they say like, I tried to use your point in this, and it's like, but this is how they said, what, you're trying to use my stuff with your friend? What are you, like, fool? Okay, because it's not useful is my point. Is that many of the Christian apologists are using double standards while they're saying that Muslims are using double standards. And the Christians are not seeing all the double standards that they're using.
So give me an example of something that you can use that could be applied to, that could steel man what Muslims are really saying, and then, give them an apologetic that they would agree with.
Well, if you're asking my approach, we can be here a long time. Okay, so
or just a sample of it.
Okay, so let me kind of try to introduce you to the essential, like if we're going to put it in a category kind of approach that we're taking, so I mentioned there's the moral critique side. We don't do that. We don't do historical skepticism, which is another thing, like questioning the existence of Muhammad. I think it's very obvious he existed, and the Quran was written in the 7th century and so on, contrary to what they're claiming. The default approach for Christians is that they're going to defend. They're going to try to defend Christian doctrine, and specifically theology and the text of the New Testament. So we're saying all of these approaches need to be stopped because they are not actually making any headway with Muslims, and they're not persuasive to them. So our approach is saying, keeping those things in mind, we're not using a standard outside of the Quran and the Bible. We're using only our texts, but we're also specifically not using the New Testament. We only use Old Testament and Quran.
In using the Old Testament, because a lot of Muslims will say the Bible's corrupted.
Yeah.
But won't they also say the Old Testament is corrupted?
Yeah, of course.
Right, okay. So how do you use then something that's corrupted that they would say, hey, this is corrupted? How could
so many, if you're watching us and you're used to hearing the stuff online, you might have heard of the argument called the Islamic dilemma, which is, I think that's a name that David Wood gave the argument. And many Christians
Stuff even made a video on it.
No, every Christian knows it, and I would say it is that is correct, but it's not enough, and it has the wrong focus. So the Islamic dilemma is basically saying, well, look, every Muslim has been taught that the Quran and Islamic sources teach that the Bible has been textually tampered with, has been changed textually. But in reality, if you look at the Quran and early Islamic sources, it teaches the opposite, which I believe is correct. Okay. Overall. Okay, the Quran definitely. Other early sources do talk about some tampering, but that's we got to get to that another time. Okay, so essentially trying to leverage the point that, well, look, you believe in the Quran actually doesn't say that. It actually says that it's reliable in time of Muhammad in the 7th century AD.
So is that step one then? Just hey,
that's
actually,
yes,
it's not corrupted.
So the way the Islamic dilemma normally is used is then to say, okay, well, see, it affirms the previous scriptures, and the Quran mentions basically 3 main scriptures, what's called the Torah, the Zabur, the Psalms of David, and the Injil, the Gospel. Okay, and where do the Christians go? They always go to the Injil.
The Gospels, yeah.
Okay, so, and they're going to try to say that's the 4 Gospels or the New Testament in general, and I'm saying this is the strategic misstep. Okay, they go focus on the New Testament. They should just focus on the Torah. That's all I do. Okay. And they're going to focus on the differences. So once they say, okay, well, it's affirming it, then we go to the Gospels or the New Testament. We see, oh, look, it says different things about Jesus and the Trinity and the cross, etc.
Then you have to go through all those hoops.
And now it's theology.
Right.
So we don't talk theology.
Because you could go into you could lose an entire conversation.
Yeah, and I need to explain my statement. We don't talk theology because theology is derived from Scripture. So what you and I believe is based on our Scripture. What a Muslim believes is based on their Scripture, okay, and their sources, okay? So the question is, which Scripture, okay? So this issue about the Islamic dilemma or what the Quran says about the previous Scriptures is the right place to begin. But the focus should not be on the New Testament, and it shouldn't be on comparing and identifying differences about theological issues. What we focus on is we restrict it only to what the Quran says about the Torah, and now most Muslims just grant that can be the Old Testament in general. It doesn't matter; it can be just the Pentateuch. That's all we need, okay? But generally, we can talk about the whole Old Testament. And now that's kind of interesting because you're saying, well, yeah, they believe it's corrupted too. Sure, okay, but why do they? Here's the question: why do Muslims think that our scriptures were corrupted? Do you know?
Well, because of how it was copied over time, and man corrupted it and changed it for political reasons, power, etc.
Okay, so yeah, like there have to be it's either like it's scribal errors accrue over time due to accident, like through accidents in copying, or if it's intentional, you have to have some motive there. So you're mentioning political motive. Usually Muslims are thinking about theological motive, right? So they're thinking about, oh, the Christians tampered with the New Testament, or they wrote these New Testament documents and deviated from Jesus' teachings because they changed the doctrine, their view of Jesus and the Trinity or the atonement or whatever. They, especially elevating him to be God when he's just a man, so they changed their scriptures to reflect that. Now, we'd say, we're going to be thinking historically, we're saying, like, where's the evidence and blah, blah, blah. Well, the issue is they don't care because they already believe the Quran is God's word. So if God said it, it trumps any of your historical evidence. Okay, so this is the difference between what is sufficient rational warrant for me and what is sufficient to persuade the other side.
Interesting. That's why, because I've used this myself, where, what are you talking about that Jesus wasn't crucified? It's historically, that's what 99.99% of historians will say. How can you go against that? And they'll just be like, well, it's just...
Well, and in fact, so Christians have all these debates, and a lot of the debates with Muslims is about the crucifixion. They're trying to talk about the historicity of the crucifixion. I'd say this is a really foolish topic because all you're doing is you're giving it to the other side. The other side automatically wins by you having the debate because you have to, as a Christian, think about it from a Muslim perspective, and that's what Christians aren't doing. And a Muslim can't lose having a debate over the crucifixion. And the reason that is because, so what is the most you could, let's say you like win, you establish your point, okay? So what is the point you're establishing? You're establishing that there was a man who very apparently was Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified under Pontius Pilate, okay? Well, what does Islam teach?
That he was swapped out.
Exactly. God made somebody else look like Jesus.
Right.
So you just proved the point.
He'll kind of go back down.
They can make up whatever they want to justify it. They don't need historical evidence for it because they just need to come up with some possible explanation that will account for the Quranic claim or the Islamic claim. Okay? So as long as they can come up with some explanation, they're not going to leave Islam. The question is, what will they not be able to really explain? And that's what I care about finding out, okay? So we don't talk about the theological issues, we talk about narrative issues, the stories. And we only talk about what is parallel between Torah or Old Testament and Quran. Now, this is really interesting because Christians and Muslims are not talking about this area. And so Muslims are not prepared for it because no Christian is talking about it. The Christians talk about the same examples of things that when they talk about anything in the stories, they're talking about Zulkarnain. Oh, that's based in Alexander myths, Alexander the Great legends, or they're talking about apocryphal legends of Jesus, like Jesus speaking as a baby in the cradle. Okay, well, that comes from an apocryphal gospel. Okay, the Arabic infancy gospel, or, etc. So again, it's New Testament. Again, it's theological. Like Jesus speaking as a baby. It's about Jesus. It's always theological. So as long as it's theological, they can imagine, even if, like, let's say you can walk them through the evidence of what the Quran says about the Injil, okay? And then you're going to go the New Testament route, and then they're going to be, let's say you convince them, which I don't think you're going to do, okay, unless they're kind of not very knowledgeable. And then you present them these issues about Jesus, and they're going to say, I guess I'm leaving Islam? No, they're going to say, it must have been corrupted. Even though the Quran doesn't say that. It had to have been, because otherwise how is it this way? Because the Quran is obviously true. It's obviously from God, so if it contradicts what God said, it had to have been, something had to happen. So that's how they reason about it. Now I'm saying that that's not based on evidence. You're just assuming, you're presupposing the Quran. But the question for me is, how do I actually break through to that person? Because that's where we'll go with like everybody. So the Islamic dilemma is not enough just to say that it affirms the previous scriptures and then there's differences, so therefore the Quran is false. Okay, well I get the logic of it, but it's not powerful enough, okay? And the analogy we use when we're talking about reaching Muslims is, imagine you're holding a plastic bag and then somebody puts a little stone in it, and then another, and another, and another, and eventually it's going to burst. But not just by putting one or two pebbles in it.
Cumulative.
You need a lot of cumulative.
And that's why you go to the Old Testament, because you can go from story to story to story.
And there's so many things in the stories. So
what are you attempting to do then in those stories, though?
Okay, so let me ask you, okay? This is an interview, but I'm interviewing you.
Yeah.
So I'm putting you on the spot, okay? So I might have already shown this to you before, but a common one we use is, so if you think in the story of Joseph when he's sold into slavery, he's thrown into the well, the brothers sell. I'm talking Genesis version, okay? I'm not going to expect you to know the Quran, but we're going to look there. So, and this is in Genesis 37. And so just from what you recall, when the brothers, they sell him into slavery, they go back home to their father Jacob, and they present the bloody shirt. How does Jacob react?
He believes that he's dead. Yeah.
So he tears his own clothes, he
mourns,
laments, it's like maybe 4 verses describing all of his crying. His sons and daughters all rise up to comfort him. He refused to be comforted. He said, I'll go down to Sheol, the realm of the dead, mourning. I'm going to grieve till the day I die.
Yeah.
Okay? Never going to be comforted. He's dead. He's his beloved son, right? He's the firstborn of Rachel, his beloved wife, right? So that's why he loves him most. Okay? So and it says, actually, I love the phrase. It says, he is a wild animal. He is without doubt torn to pieces. Okay? So I'll read you the Quranic account. So this is in Surah 12, Surah Yusuf. And Surah 12 is almost the entire thing is about the story of Joseph. So I always say for Christians, if you want to learn, if you're going to reach a Muslim, you have to read the Quran. Okay? And any Christian who says they want to reach a Muslim and they're not willing to read the Quran, I don't take seriously. They're not really wanting to reach a Muslim.
What about because I heard David Wood say you don't have to read the entire Quran, you just have to know these argumentations because it's going to confuse you.
How would you feel if you did it like golden rule? If somebody did that talking about reaching Christians,
right.
How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I would feel, well, you should read the whole Bible, not just these talking points.
Exactly.
Right.
And isn't that what Muslims do? They're trained with, you don't need to read the whole Bible or the whole, it's a waste of time. It's so much to read. It's so much detail and information that's unnecessary. Just learn these points.
And it's not effective because they're straw manning everything.
Yeah, and for us, that's the thing. So go the other way. We want to reach them. We want to persuade them. What will be persuasive to them? I got to think where they're coming from. They should be thinking where we're coming from. What will be persuasive to me and us? Is it going to be persuasive to us if they rip verses out of context? They say, look, Matthew 11 says Jesus sends out his disciples, and he says, only go to the lost sheep of Israel. So therefore, the Bible even says that Jesus was only sent to Israel, not to the nations. And you're going to say, did you read the rest of the gospel?
Context.
The same book?
Yeah.
How did that same book end?
Right.
He sends his disciples to all the nations. Okay? So it's pretty disingenuous, and I would say it really ends up being kind of deceptive and insincere. So I would say, if a Christian has any seriousness about reaching Muslims, they need to read the whole Quran for sure. Okay? But what I would say to focus on when you're reading it is the stories.
Old Testament.
Any of the stories, but especially Old Testament stories, that's what we're going to use. And then also, and compare it with the biblical accounts that are parallel. There are many stories in the Quran that have no parallel. Okay. We don't talk about those.
But this one has parallel.
This is a parallel, so let's come back to it. Yeah, thanks. So in Surah 12, verses 16 to 18, it says, then this is the sons of Jacob, the brothers of Joseph, then they returned to their father in the evening, weeping. They cried, our father, we went racing and left Joseph with our belongings, and a wolf devoured him. But you will not believe us, no matter how truthful we are. And they brought his shirt stained with false blood. He responded, no, your souls must have tempted you to do something, so I can only endure with beautiful patience. It is God's help I seek to bear your claims.
So he's doubting them there.
They're lying. He doesn't believe them. Okay. And so does he think Joseph is alive or dead?
Thinks he's alive.
There you go.
Wow.
In fact, it says it very explicitly later on in the same account. If you keep reading the rest of the Quranic narrative of Joseph, he talks about. Well, I could find it for you. Let's read it. So so it says in verse 94 and 95. This is the very end of the story. Okay, so the caravan is departing from Egypt to come back to pick up Jacob and bring him down to Egypt. Okay, they're going to relocate. And it says, when the caravan departed from Egypt, their father said to those around him, you may think I am senile, but I certainly sense the smell of Joseph. They replied, by God, you are definitely still in your old delusion. But when the bearer of the good news arrived, he cast the shirt over Jacob's face, so he regained his sight. Jacob then said to his children, did I not tell you that I truly know from God what you don't know? So Jacob knows all along, because Jacob is a prophet in the Quran as well. Okay? that Joseph is alive.
Saying.
And he talks about it all the time.
So this entire time that Joseph's been gone,
He thinks he's alive. He knows he's alive. In fact, because he heard the dream of the sun, moon, and 11 stars, which is also in the Quran. And again, there's differences there. So in Genesis, who does he tell the dream to? Do you remember? So he tells it to his brothers. Okay, he has two dreams, the sheaves of wheat that bow down to him, and he tells his brothers, and they get upset. What are we going to bow down and you're going to rule over?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. And then the second dream, which is the dream in the Quran also, because it doesn't mention the first one, the sun, moon, and 11 stars, he tells his brothers. Okay. And then he tells his brothers again along with his father. So his father didn't hear the first dream, he hears the second dream. This is the Genesis account. Jacob reacts. He says he rebukes him, so it's harsh correction, and he says, what, are we going to bow down and serve you? You're going to rule over us? Jacob's reaction is that he's upset hearing the dream, and he rebukes Joseph. And Joseph has told both the dreams to his brothers and also the father of the second dream. In the Quranic narrative, I'll read it to you, it's very short. So it's at the very beginning of Surah 12, verse 4 and 5. Remember when Joseph said to his father, "O my dear father, indeed I dreamt of 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them prostrating to me." He replied, "O my dear son, do not relate your vision to your brothers, or they will devise a plot against you. Surely Satan is a sworn enemy to humankind."
so he actually tells them, don't do that.
And
or
he
they're
doesn't
gonna-
tell them.
In the Quran, he doesn't tell them.
Right.
He doesn't tell the brothers in the
Correct.
Quran. Huh. So what would be the motive then for the brothers' jealousy to go in?
Well, the next scene, verse 8, remember when they, the brothers, said to one another, "Surely Joseph and his brother Benjamin are more beloved to our father than we, even though we are a group of so many. Indeed, our father is clearly mistaken. Kill Joseph or cast him out to some distant land, so that our father's attention will be only ours. Then after that you may repent and become righteous people." One of them said, "Don't kill Joseph, but if you must do something, throw him into the bottom of a well, so perhaps he may be picked up by some travelers." Okay, let me read the next verse. Yeah. They said, "Oh, our father, why do you not trust us with Joseph, although we truly wish him well? Send him out with us tomorrow, so that he may enjoy himself and play, and we will really watch over him." And he doesn't trust them at first, but eventually he goes with them. Okay, so question I ask Muslims if I do this part of the story is, how old is Joseph? Do you know how old he is in the Genesis account?
Was he in his teens?
Yes. Yeah. Genesis 37 verse 2 says he is 17 years old.
17, yeah.
Here, I say, how old is he in the Quranic narrative? He's a small child.
That's why he wants to go and play.
He needs to have supervision. And the brothers have to ask for permission and say, we're going to watch over him while he plays. That's not a 17-year-old. That's a child. And where are the brothers if they're asking their father for permission? They're home. In Genesis, this is right after the dreams. So right after the dream, that in the Quran, he tells his father says, "Don't tell your brothers." He doesn't tell his brothers. Then the next scene is the brothers plotting. They come up with their plan. They're done coming up with their plan. They're going to throw him into a well in hopes a caravan might find him, which is kind of funny. But then they go and they ask their father for permission. "Let Joseph come with us." Okay. The Genesis narrative in Genesis 37, they tell the brothers both the dreams and the father, here's the second dream. The father rebukes him. And then what is the next scene? The brothers are way off tending to the flock up in Shechem. And they live in, the home base is in Hebron. Okay, this is at least 70, 75 kilometers away up north to Shechem. Okay, so the brothers are not home.
Right.
The brothers are not asking their father, "Send Joseph out with us." Joseph is at home with their father. All the other brothers are up in Shechem. So, other than probably maybe Benjamin, okay? But then Jacob says, your brothers have been gone a long time. Go check up on them, see if it's well with them.
Right.
So Jacob's idea...
Which also you wouldn't do for a little kid.
There you go. Right, you're going to send a 5 to 7-year-old 75 kilometer. How long would it take to travel there, do you think, one way?
What's that, a few days?
At least, maybe a week. Yeah. On foot. It's hill country, too.
Right.
And you're going to send a small child multiple-day journey or through the hill country? No, it's preposterous. That's why it doesn't happen in the Quran. Each account kind of makes sense in its own framework.
Right. And wait, they go back in the Quran, though? They go back to convince Jacob to let...
No, they're not gone.
Aha.
They plot. So this is a question I asked. Where are they when they're plotting? That's what I asked them in the Quran. Well, it tells you they're not very far from home because the next thing they do is they ask their father. So I say, well, okay, we can't tell exactly where they are, but they're like, I said, they're probably not in the same house, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not saying it, they're at least outside of earshot of their father.
Yeah.
But they're not so far away, they probably already know which well they're going to put him in, right? According to the narrative. We'll throw him into the well and a caravan's going to come by and you're going to pick him up, okay? So we're not thinking like 100 kilometers up north, because it's actually even further. They go up to Dothan, which is even further than Shechem, where Joseph ends up finding them in Genesis. So, and then in Genesis, Joseph goes, because it's the idea of their father to send Joseph, so he's not distrusting the brothers and worried about sending Joseph, and he has to be convinced by the brothers to let him go, like in the Quran. It's his own idea to send him. And so he sends him off. He goes up. Okay, they're not in Shechem. He runs into the stranger. He says, oh, I heard them go up to Dothan. He goes up to Dothan. And then it says the brothers see Joseph on the edge of the field as he's approaching. The brothers see Joseph approaching at a distance at the edge of the field, and they say, there's that dreamer, because they know the dreams. Let's kill him and see what becomes of his dreams. Okay, so when are they plotting? In Dothan. They're not plotting in Hebron, at home, before they leave. They've been gone. Actually, how long have they been gone? Because if it takes, let's say it's a week to walk there, okay? So the father thinks they've been gone too long. That means it's more than 2 weeks, because they've been gone too long. Maybe it's a month. How long have they been gone in the Quran? It says they came back in the evening.
Say that again, say that. They came back.
In the evening. It says, let's take him out with us tomorrow. And then it says they came back in the evening.
So it wouldn't even be possible for them unless they...
Geographically, so we show them, like one of the things I do is I show them maps.
Right.
So not that you're going to be able to see it here, but maybe I'll send you a picture to put up. So I'll show them like this atlas, and I'll show them a map of this story where it's talking about they're in Hebron, they go up to Shechem, the Genesis story, and then Dothan, and the caravan comes and brings them down to Egypt. Okay? So from here to here, this is not within a day. That they can go there and come back.
Yeah, not even close.
Right? It's like the whole story is so different, right?
And what's their response normally when you, because that's quite striking, right? All those differences already, that's a lot of rocks already, right? What's normally a response?
Silence.
Really?
And we move on to other stories.
So you just plant that rock, so to speak.
And they need a lot of them. So essentially, like if you think about it this way, if I'm going to persuade you, that's why I'm saying the Islamic dilemma is not enough.
But it is, so there's no rebuttal, you're saying.
I'm not saying there's never anything that they try to say.
Right.
It's also how you do it. Like what we're trying to do is we're trying to present them information. We're not trying to have a full-on conversation as we go through. Because there's actually a lot of information to share. And for them to understand our argument, we're presenting them a cumulative case. So if we're going to present a cumulative case, we got to get a lot on the table first. Otherwise, they're going to try to nitpick every little thing, and we're never going to get anywhere, okay? And they're not going to see the full picture. What they need to begin to see, and they're not even going to see the full picture because this picture is so big, so many huge mountain of problems. I will never have enough time with anybody to go through all the issues, okay? Like I'm developing comparison charts on all the stories and analyzing all the details. So like something I sometimes ask people, so nowadays you've seen some verses in the Quran about that story. Okay, so if you were to imagine, I don't know if I've already asked you this before, so it might ruin it if I have. But if you were to imagine, the Quran has 98 verses on Joseph in the Quran. So almost 100 verses in the narrative. How many differences do you think there would be between 98 verses and Genesis 37 to 50?
How many differences in terms of the story between, in Genesis and the Quran?
Yeah, based on 98 verses in the Quran.
So you just told us, kind of probably a handful, right?
Those are a handful of big ones.
A dozen, maybe?
Okay, so when I have gone through all the minutiae, I've counted 941.
941,
yeah. Just in Joseph.
Wow.
That's almost 10 a verse.
What kind of differences are these?
All different kinds, all forms of differences, okay? Now, a Muslim might try to harmonize some things here or there. Okay, let's say they take 10% of them.
Right. 100.
Good luck, okay, with the rest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still got 800 to go.
So here's the thing. What started us, the Bible's corrupted? Great. The Bible's corrupted. You think the Bible's corrupted? This is the point we're trying to help help them to see the problem.
Right.
It's not, they can claim that the Bible's corrupted. Now, at first we're going to say, okay, the Quran doesn't say that. And then we're going to mention Dead Sea Scrolls and manuscripts that predate the time of Muhammad. So then we can say, well, actually, the manuscript evidence, even in accordance with what the Quran claims about the Torah, the state of the Torah in the time, we have it. Okay, fine. But once they start seeing the differences, they're going to say,
Actually, the Quran's corrupted.
no, what is a Muslim going to say?
Oh,
They're going to still say the Torah is corrupted.
yeah.
Okay? Because if they don't
So
say...
how do you
so,
bridge
okay,
that?
so this is my point, okay? This is the thing that's being missed, in addition to the wrong testament being focused on in the Islamic dilemma. They're stopping at just simply that point, that the Quran says it, but then we find differences. There's so much more you have to do beyond that to actually drive it home and to help them to see the problem. Because the problem is not primarily in the theology. The primary issues are in the narrative. And it's not just Joseph, it's every narrative is like this, okay? So,
Interesting. And you're saying
so-
from the narrative.
so let's think about this example of the narrative that we're talking about,
Yeah.
okay? So let's think about what are they actually having to claim without them realizing it. They are saying the Torah was corrupted. So Genesis was corrupted. The first part of the Torah was corrupted. And originally, what did it say? The way the Quran says it. So that account of Jacob and Joseph and the brothers that we just read about with the dreams, with the plotting, where they were, how old Joseph was, did they have to convince their father or not, were they off tending to the flock, the order of those events, who heard the dream, okay? When they presented the bloody shirt, there's actually so many more things in that passage we just don't have time to look at, right? And how did Jacob react? And then even that consistently through the narrative, he still believes he's alive in the Quran. He still believes he's dead all throughout the Genesis until
But
the
wouldn't
end.
they just say there's the differences because that's corrupted, but the Quran
Fine.
is the-
Okay, still fine. Okay, fine. They think it's corrupted. Fine. But you have to understand what you're saying. As a Muslim, you're saying it's corrupted specifically in these ways. No more generalities. You have to face all of the specific differences and account for them. And explain to me how this is possible and why. Because remember we said earlier on, what's the motive for the change?
Theological, political,
Okay,
power.
so
now
now
if it's a
apply
narrative,
it. Now apply
what's
it.
The, what would
So
be,
go through the specific details we looked at.
and apply
Is
some
it
type of
theological? Is it change in ethical teachings? Is there a political motive? Is there anything about prophecies of Muhammad? These are the 4 ones that we go through typically.
motive. And you'll find that there's not.
Not.
So you can't find a motive.
Now you can say, okay, maybe things about differences in the accounts about Jesus, there's a theological difference.
Yes.
Fine, but I don't want to talk about those things.
And that's why you stick with.
We stick with Torah and we focus on narrative details, we say details, not doctrine.
Right.
And now what a Muslim typically will try to say to defend it is to say, well, this is why the Quran is so amazing, because the Quran doesn't talk about all these unnecessary details and information that's in the Bible. The Quran is so beautiful because it just gives us all the information that we need. Anything else that isn't useful, it omits.
And you find that's a typical kind of rebuttal.
Okay, so if they're trying to defend it. Now, some people are so just like, they don't know what to say. Because it's like, so obviously this doesn't make sense. On a scale,
Even geographically, it doesn't make sense.
geographically, like when are we talking, when are we talking about? Why? We have no motive. Like the Jews are going to change their Torah? What do the Jews think of the Torah? They almost worship it. And they're going to change it? They're going to change, okay, like my friend once, his example was like, imagine if you were to try to convince the Jews today, or you as a Christian even, we're trying to convince the other Christians, let's change one word in the Bible. We're all going to change it. Let's say instead of in the beginning, we're going to say in the very beginning. Are you going to be able to accomplish that?
No.
Nobody's going to agree
Nobody
to it.
would, yeah.
And it's not, like, it doesn't even change any of the teaching.
Right.
So they're not going to do it for that. Are they going to do it for the teaching? How are you, and you got to unify
Yeah.
everywhere, okay? It's impossible, okay? So this is why we're sticking to, okay, corruption. That's great, you think that, but you don't really know the implications of what you're saying and what that really actually means. So we're trying to help them to see all the specific ways that it must have been corrupted if the Islamic narrative is true. And then they've got to defend that. They're not defending a nebulous, abstract concept of corruption, because that's what every Muslim thinks, is they don't know what is corrupted, what it was changed, or when it was changed. They just know it must have been changed because it's not compatible with the Quran. They're not thinking about, who cares about, take Jacob's reaction, okay? He believed that Joseph is alive or believed he's dead, believed the report of the brothers or didn't. Why did the Jews change that?
Motive.
No motive. Could you have done it accidentally? by copying the manuscript.
Not
No,
900 of them.
There's no way you could do that because it's like 4 verses long describing his crying in Genesis. Because you got to think the original version is like the Quran. So Genesis or the Torah originally said it like the Quran. It could be longer, but the point is, it told it that way. So you change it. It's not like he did not believe them and then they forgot the not when they copied it. He did believe them. Okay, no, they got to add in, and he cried, and he tear his clothes, and his sons and daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and he said, I'll go down to Sheol, mourning for my son. That's not a slip of the pen.
Right.
Okay? That's if it was changed, which obviously, it obviously wasn't. But if it, we got to hypothetically help them think it through. What are they really saying? The Quranic version had to be what the original Torah before it was corrupted said. Okay, that's the same account. Might not be word for word, but it's the same ideas, same narrative that's there. And the Jews changed it to what we have now in Genesis, in all these specific ways. Okay? Why? There's no reason, and there's no manuscript evidence. I'd say, I don't care what time, Hebrew or a translation of it, and in an ancient translation, and any, geographically, anywhere you go at any time, any part of the world, in any language, it tells it the same way. And it doesn't tell it the way the Quran says it. You could go to the Samaritan Pentateuch, you could go to the, and all of these they're like different religious groups. The Samaritan Pentateuch, the rabbis with the Masoretic text, the Qumran, Essenes, the Josephus, who he doesn't have the Torah, but he writes his own account. He rewrites the story as a history in the Antiquities of the Jews. He's a first century Jewish historian. He's not with the rabbis because he sides with the Romans. Okay, so he's another allegiance. And then you got the Christians, and they got the Greek Septuagint. And then all these translations.
It's all the same.
It's all the same account, except for the Quran.
Wow.
And they don't, of that is, it's hard to unpack all of that. But if you think about it, why are we talking about anything else?
Right. And will they ever kind of, in that silence, go to, well, maybe it's so that in the future, something with Jesus and that he's not God, and something with Trinity. And
okay, so
will
they're
they
going
ever kind of try to deflect and go back to
they can try to deflect. Typically, they don't really, if you know how to walk through the points that we have kind of a base number of points that we like to walk through to start out, and then we can go into all different stories if they want to actually face the issues that are there, and they're going to give us time. But typically, they don't try to deflect on that, because also, even if they do, I don't care, because we're not talking about the New Testament. We're starting with the Torah.
Right. So you'll just say, oh, well, we're not.
I'm not defending that. Yeah, and actually, they get really confused. Sometimes they say, are you a Christian? I'm like, I don't care about the New Testament. I only care about the Old Testament right now. Okay,
right. Let's just talk about this right now. Let's just
and if you don't do that, you will get off track, and they'll go back to theology.
Right.
And where does theology come from? From a scripture. So you're appealing to a text that you're saying is specially revealed. And then they're appealing to there. So the question is, how do we adjudicate this difference of claim? And so we're not going to do it by debating the theological claims that are within them, because they're going to talk about the Trinity. I say, well, and this is at the beginning, not the end, right? They're not allowed to go to those issues later on once you presented these, because they have to actually answer it.
Right.
If they're not willing to answer it, we're not talking about anything else.
Right.
Okay, because that's not fair to say, here are all these major issues, and let's talk about something else. No.
And so what are because that Joseph one is that a key one?
No, it's just a normal example.
Can you go to the other stories
any
in
of them
Genesis?
You could do this.
Wow.
Anywhere you go,
anything that's parallel. To
any parallel account.
And which are the ones that are parallel to the Quran? Just off the top.
So the Quran talks about the biblical figures that it talks about that have parallel stories. Well, let's start at the beginning. So Adam, Cain and Abel, Noah, Abraham and Ishmael, and not really a story, but Isaac
just
kind of mentioned.
Up until Ishmael, from all those that you mentioned, you're saying that the Quranic narrative and the biblical or the Torah narrative, there's a lot of differences.
Yeah, so in Noah, I counted about, I think it's 143 differences.
Oh.
Adam is around 130. Cain and Abel, which I think is only 4 verses or something in the Quran, it's 21 differences.
Wow.
Right, and it's just I haven't done them all yet. The big ones I haven't even done, which is Abraham and Ishmael.
Abraham is more than Jacob, because Jacob you found 900.
Jacob is, actually, can I show you one? I don't know if I did. Did I show you the one with Moses' marriage?
No.
Okay, we got to do this one.
Okay.
And actually, I don't know if there's a way to get your facial reaction, because I like to actually video people's reactions Christians' reactions when they read some of the stories.
Okay.
So this is in Surah 28 in the Quran. Okay. And if you could read it out loud, obviously. So from verse 23 and through 29.
Okay. Okay.
In the Quran, this is the account of Moses fleeing from Egypt and going to Midian.
Yes.
Okay.
When he arrived at the well of Midian, he found a group of people watering their herds. Apart from them, he noticed 2 women holding back their herd. He asked them, "What is the problem?" They replied, "We cannot water our animals until the other shepherds are done, for our father is very old man." So he watered their herd for them. Then we drew to the shade and prayed, "My Lord, I am truly in desperate need of whatever provision you may have in store for me." Moses gets married. Verse 25. Then one of the 2 women came to him, walking bashfully. She said, "My father is inviting you, so he may reward you for watering our animals for us." When Moses came to him and told him his whole story, the old man said, "Have no fear. You are now safe from the wrongdoing people." One of the 2 daughters suggested, "Oh, my dear father, hire him. The best man for employment is definitely the strong and trustworthy one." The old man proposed, "I wish to marry one of these 2 daughters of mine to you, provided that you stay in my service for 8 years, and you complete 10. It will be a favor from you, but I do not wish to make it difficult for you. God willing, you will find me an agreeable man." Moses responded, "Then it is settled between you and I. Whichever term I fulfill, there will be no further obligation on me, and God is a witness to what we say." When Moses had completed the term and was traveling with his family, he spotted a fire on the side of Mount Tur.
Okay, so that means it's the burning bush.
Yes.
Yeah, so we can stop there. So,
Yeah, so wait.
anything stand out to you?
I mean, the years, number one.
Okay, what is that about?
So the year here was, what, 10 years?
8 or 10 years.
8 or 10 years.
He's got to work for 8 or 10 years
Yeah,
to get his wife.
right.
What does that sound like?
That's a different story.
Thank you. What's the story?
That's Isaac.
Not Isaac.
I mean, that's Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob,
Jacob and Laban.
Jacob and Laban with Rachel.
With Rachel and
Leah.
Leah. So that's Jacob's story.
Thank
Inserted
you. It's
Moses.
Moses here. Okay, we're not going to move on yet. They're at a well.
Yeah.
Jacob also goes to a well.
Yes.
How many women are in the Quran?
2.
That's right.
Yeah, 2, right?
2. 2. It mentions 2.
Yes.
He marries one of 2. He works for one of 2.
That's Jacob's.
It's all Jacob. Jacob also goes to a well and meets Rachel there.
Yes.
And goes back and he marries, well, he's tricked. Here he's an agreeable man, which is, I think, hilarious. Okay, I think it's playing on it. But it's supposed to be Moses here.
And then the obligation, that wasn't Moses, that was...
Okay, thank you. So in Exodus, you have to pause to recalibrate yourself which one we're talking about. In Exodus, Moses, does he work to get his wife?
No.
Right. And he marries Zipporah, who is one of how many daughters of Jethro? Do you know? A lot of people don't.
I remember.
7.
7.
Here it's 2. It's not Moses.
This is
But
Jacob.
it is Moses.
So do they ever get to the point where you're going, wait a minute, it looks like somebody read...
They don't know this account. There is no account of Jacob in the Quran. Except there is because they think it's actually Moses, but it's not Jacob. Okay, so we call this a mixed story. This is a very powerful one. The mixed stories are very powerful because now I want you, Revo, I want you to think about this. How are you going to unravel this? What's their claim? It's corrupted.
Right.
Be specific.
Right.
Specifically in this way. So what did the Torah originally say? You probably can't even figure it out. It's too complicated.
Yeah.
You have to unravel this. So Genesis, you have in Genesis 29, Jacob goes to the well. There's a heavy, if you remember, there's a heavy rock lid on the well. So he's there talking with the male shepherds, waiting till all the shepherds come. And they say, once they all come, we'll move it off because it's too heavy for one of us to move. And we all water. And then Rachel comes, and here she's a very attractive lady, and he sees her, and I think he wants to be impress her, I mean. So he pushes the rock lid off and waters her flock, and then she goes back to Laban. And then the whole trickery happens when he sleeps with Leah, not thinking it's Rachel on the wedding night, because Laban tricked him. And then he has to work another 7 years. Okay, so you got to have that account come out of this. So the Jews changed, that's the original account, according to the Bible was corrupted claim.
Right.
You got to be specific. That's why I'm saying be specific, and they don't know the specifics because they don't know this stuff. So it's our job to show it to them and say, okay.
So then will you share then Jacob's account here?
Yeah,
with
we'll share.
Rachel
Yeah.
and
So usually,
say, actually, that is this story. And then will you share
well,
then,
actually,
is this
usually
story?
we read them and they figure it out themselves.
I see. Interesting. Because then they'll be like, the parallel here is not Moses, is actually.
So yeah, I think what we usually do is we'll read the Jacob account first,
Okay.
and then we'll read this,
Wow.
and then we'll read Exodus 2. Okay?
That is wild, because as I'm reading it, I'm going, wait, this is Moses.
So
but
if you
my
think
brain
of
is
Revo,
going,
do you want to debate the Trinity anymore?
no, not at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you want to offend them with immorality stuff?
Yeah, no need.
It's completely
Yeah,
unnecessary,
yeah, wow.
right?
Incredible. I feel convicted because I've been sharing a lot of stuff on my Twitter or my X feed. And yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I think the problem is it's just people don't know. Now, actually, there's another problem is one we have shared with Christians, especially Christians when we share with them who have been in ministry to Muslims for years. They're doing all this other stuff, the traditional Christian apologetics to Muslims. They don't know this stuff. They don't know this stuff. I've talked to many people. I said, do you know the story? Do you know the story? Or asked them the story about Saul. Okay. I don't know if you want to look at that.
So Saul is different as well.
Do you want to look at that one?
Yeah.
It's the next mixed story we'll show them.
Okay. Because we're in 1 Samuel right now. So yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I'd love to.
Where, how far are you in it?
We've gone through chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I think we're at 15 or 16.
You're perfect. You're perfect.
Okay.
You cover all that you need except, David and Goliath, you know that one.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, we've done that.
I mean, you know the story, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, if you read, so this is in Surah 2, chapter 2 of the Quran.
Okay, so where am
it
I
starts in verse 246, but for the sake of time, we'll skip down to 247. To summarize, 246 is basically the children of Israel are asking their prophet for a king.
Okay, so this is
So
Samuel.
this is Samuel, and they understand it's Samuel, though he's not named. And then he appoints Saul, that's 247. Read through to 251, wherever that is.
Okay, so 247 to
51.
I'm going to put the camera on me again.
Yeah.
Their prophet told them, God has appointed Saul to be your king. They protested. How can he be our king when some of us are more deserving of kinship than he? And he has not been blessed with vast riches.
You got to make it through, then we'll talk about
Okay,
it.
because I'm already, okay. He replied, God has chosen him over you and blessed him with knowledge and stature. God grants kinship to whoever he wills, and God is all bountiful, all knowing. The prophet told them, the sign of Saul's kinship is that the ark will come to you, containing reassurance from your Lord and relics of the family of Moses and the family of Aaron, which will be carried by angels. Surely in this is a sign for you, if you truly believe. 249, Saul's victory. When Saul marched forth with his army, he cautioned, God will test you with a river. So whoever drinks his fill from it is not with me, and whoever does not taste it, except a sip from the hollow of his hands, is definitely with me. They all drank their fill, except for a few. When he had the remaining faithful with him cross the river, they said, now we are no match for Goliath and his warriors. But those believers who were certain they would meet God reasoned, how many times has a small force vanquished a mighty army by the will of God, and God is always with the steadfast. David kills Goliath. When they advanced to face Goliath and his warriors, they prayed, O Lord, shower us with perseverance, make our steps firm, and give us victory over the disbelieving people. So they defeated them by God's will, and David killed Goliath. And God blessed David with kinship and wisdom and taught him what he willed. Had God not repelled a group of people by the might of another, corruption would have dominated the earth. But
Okay,
God...
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, there's already so much.
Okay, there's so much. So first things that come to your mind that stand out.
Okay, well, the people protesting.
Okay, so what's odd about that?
Well, when Saul was appointed, they didn't protest.
That's right.
Because
said
he was the most handsome, long-lived. Yeah.
Long-lived king.
Yeah.
He's the most handsome.
He's
the
the
tallest.
tallest, right?
What did they protest about? Did you notice?
Because
What are the reasons?
Because he has not been blessed with vast riches. And that is not true as well, because Saul's coming from a wealthy family.
That's correct. 1 Samuel 9, 1 and 2, he's the son of Kish, who was a wealthy man.
Right, yeah, and influential.
And it says some of us are more deserving. No, I mean, they think he's like the perfect fit for the kind of king that they want.
He's literally the tallest, the most handsome, wealthy.
Okay, so they protest. So in other words, they're not accepting him as the pick. So then the Quran is saying, that, okay, this is how this is the sign that you'll know. God's going to give a sign that it's God who chose him. So you need to accept him if it's God. So what's the proof? What's the sign that Saul is God's pick according to the Quran? What's the sign? It's the ark. Read the ark.
Oh, the ark, right. The ark will come to you, kinship.
This is the
so
sign.
The sign of conquest is the ark will come to you.
So the proof that Saul is chosen by God to be king is that the ark will come to you. Now here's the question. You know, you've recently been looking at 1 Samuel. Okay, who captured the ark from Israel? Who captured the ark?
The Amalekites?
Philistines.
Philistines,
Yeah,
okay.
right. So they took it. They had to have it in their possession. Then it starts causing diseases and tumors. The god in the temple of Dagon falls over, right?
And so then in this text, the Philistines would be the worthy ones?
No. What I want you to see is the proof that Saul is king is the ark is going to return because it was taken. But when did it return in 1 Samuel? They already sent it back.
Because of the
diseases and stuff.
Right.
Well, let's get rid of it. We can't hold on to it.
Yeah.
So at the end of chapter 6, they send it back. It goes to Kiryat Jearim. And chapter 7, verses 1 to 2, it says it's there for 20 years. It's already back in Israel's hands before they even asked for a king. That's chapter 7. Chapter 8, they ask for a king. Here, it's the proof that God chose him to be king is going to come back.
Right. But it was already back.
It was already back for decades.
That's right.
So it's a total mix-up of the time. Now let's go to the river. What's the river?
So yeah, the river, they're testing you. Whoever drinks his fill.
What is it?
Sounds like Gideon.
There you go. You got it.
That is wild. So it's a bunch of stories getting mashed into...
Gideon is the one who goes down to the river in Judges 7. Saul doesn't go down to a river.
No.
He doesn't test his army.
No.
What is Saul doing when he sees Goliath?
He's backed up. He
doesn't run into the battle to fight him?
No.
No, obviously not. It's like the total opposite. Here he's the hero leading the charge into the battle with a few because all the other ones got weeded out. And they're going to charge forward like they're afraid they're going to die in battle, and they say, well, okay, but God has given victory even to the few. We could trust God. And Saul leads the charge into battle. And that's after going down to the river, testing them with the river, whittling them down. That's Gideon.
Wow. Yeah.
And then it says, and David killed Goliath, which I love that part. It's like, he's the afterthought. He's the afterthought. And what is David killing Goliath in the midst of the battle that Saul is leading the charge into?
Wow.
It's like, so now try to unravel this. How did it get corrupted?
Right. Interesting.
So the Jews originally had the Tanakh, the Old Testament, that said it the way the Quran says it, and the Jews changed it to we have it now? It's impossible.
Right. Interesting.
Okay.
Man.
So what we want to do is we want to help share with them the stories, put them side by... Now, these two are very kind of devastating ones we call mixed stories. There are technically kind of two more of them. Those are like really key ones. Yeah. One of them they kind of know.
Is the Moses one and this one of Saul, those are the ones that are really, you see them?
I think they're very... So we normally share other... We start with the Joseph story and we share some other... We compare stuff about Abraham and Ishmael and Hagar in the Islamic narrative. No, we're not talking about Ishmael and Isaac. That's the wrong thing to focus on.
Okay.
That people talk about all the time. We're talking about the story of when Hagar and Ishmael separated from Abraham. Because the Islamic account, and actually this is actually the key, if we're going to talk about the main point that we have to focus on, is this account. Because in the Islamic account, which is mostly so there's a hadith in the collection Sahih Bukhari, and it's 3,364, the hadith number. We always say you only need to know 2 hadith, okay, for this approach. That and hadith number 3 in Bukhari, which is the cave story. Wow. Okay. This one,
Greg.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to just because it's 3:56.
Oh, we gotta wrap up. Okay, yeah.
My son. But man, this deserves a part 2.
For sure.
But can you just let people know where to get in touch with you on socials?
We've got a YouTube channel. We haven't published for a while, but it's called Until All Here, and you can also find the same on Instagram. And I think that the account name has periods between the words until.all.here. Is the handle, and you can always DM us on there.
And you'll be able to respond yourself?
I'll be able to respond on there, yeah, not through YouTube, but except through comments. Cool. But yeah, we just want to help get this information out because, as you know, nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Right? And this needs to be the focus. So thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure. We got to do it more.
Yeah, we got to do a part 2 because, we We really need to get into the weeds of that. But
Yep.
thanks so much, man. We're definitely doing a part 2. Make sure you guys check him out. Get in touch with Greg if you want any of the resources there. And yeah, man, thanks so much. That was amazing. That was mind blowing. And I think that's a good having me read through that.
Yeah.
And just you almost get confused, right?
Okay.
You
Well,
go through it.
yeah, and that is the approach.
Yeah.
We want to open the text together and read it.
Cool.
Right.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
We'll see you again, part 2.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Revo Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reasoning with faith.